Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show. Check me out, y'all. Look, when a person changes, right? I'm talking about like truly changes their life. It's not an easy transition. It's just not. I remember when I first stepped away from the oil, I felt awkward initially. I still had that feeling in me where I wanted to be a part of something and wanted to belong and wanted to be accepted. So uh, I didn't feel whole, if that makes any sense to you out there. You know what I mean? Some of y'all that might be listening might be able to relate to what I'm saying. It's just an awkward feeling. So I would still uh, hang around the guys. I would still talk like the guys. I would still do some of the things that the guys were doing. I just wasn't a part of the business. You know, when they would have meetings and stuff like that, I couldn't participate and stuff like that, right? But I still had that longing to be accepted and be validated by them. It was almost like, I took a hit to my confidence. My self esteem was low. It was weird what was going on. Right, I didn't understand a lot of it. I didn't have the terminology that I have today to explain what it was that I was experiencing. Right, but it was almost like on the one hand I was this confident person that everybody looked up to, but in private, I was insecure about myself and my surroundings and where I fit in and all of that old kind of stuff, right? And I had this desire to go back. I'm talking about it was a real strong pull that regardless of how messed up the organization was, regardless of all the petty backbiting and all this and that, I still was drawn to it. And I'm not gonna say it was because of GD per se. It was just that being validated and being accepted by people. You know what I'm saying? I would imagine that people go through that when they get out of relationships. People go through that when they break up with friends and don't want to be around each other anymore. I can imagine a lot of that stuff happening, right? And I'm going to tell you about, in this story, I'm going to tell you about this guy named John. And John changed his life. I mean, flat out changed his life. He wasn't a member of any organization or anything like that, right? But he was getting his bread. I'm talking about getting his bread in here, right? And I don't say that to glorify it. I'm just telling you what it was. And John changed his life. He walked away from all of that. He stopped doing that. And he still had a lot of years to go. So he wasn't like a lot of dudes in here that right before they get ready to go for parole or right before they get ready to go home, they stop doing everything. He just stopped. He still had over 10 or 12 years to go, something like that, right? He didn't want it anymore. He did not want it anymore, and he walked away from everything, right? But John was very popular. He had a lot of friends, and a lot of people knew him, and he had a lot of business associates that he did business with, people that relied on him and depended on him, right? And one of those individuals was this dude named Leroy. Now, Leroy has never stopped doing anything, but Leroy and John, they knew each other from the streets. Now, Leroy had gotten transferred, so him and John had been separated for years. For years. And then, a lot of people in here, I'm like this. I don't do a lot of writing letters. I just don't do it. You know what I'm saying? I'll send you a card, and if I do write, I might write once a year. You know what I'm saying? And that it is. That's just what it is with me. And Leroy and John were like that. So Leroy had no idea that John had changed his life in the way that he had. He thought that his old friend was still doing the same old things, and when he touched down at the same penitentiary, that he would be able to just holler at his partner, and it goes down. Simple as that, right? Now, it hadn't been that long that John had stopped doing what he was doing. I'm going to say a year or two, maybe, okay? It might have been a little longer than that, but it wasn't that long. So when Leroy touched down at the penitentiary that he was in, they got together. You know what I'm saying? And Leroy was talking to him as if things had never changed. And was something inside of John that didn't stop him. He didn't tell Leroy, don't talk like that. He joined in. He joined in, and they were reminiscing, and they were talking about old times. They were talking about how they used to get the pack in and all the things that they used to even do on the streets. You know, how they hitting that highway and going to get that bag and doing all the things they was doing, the parties, the having the fun as they saw fun at that time. And he was enjoying what it was making him feel like participating in that conversation, the several conversations that he had with John over the time that they were together at this institution. And it was something going on inside of him that he didn't recognize. He didn't recognize that. He knew that he didn't want the lifestyle anymore, but being around Leroy and talking about the lifestyle made him feel alive. And I can relate to that. I can relate to that because when I walked away from the org, when I was around the guys and I'm kicking it with the guys and talking about the trials and tribulations, the ups and downs and all this, it made me feel alive. It was a weird thing that was going on. You knew, you know what I'm saying? On one hand, I knew that it wasn't straight. And on the other hand, it was like, man, this is fun. It makes me feel like somebody. And that's what John was going through. He's talking to Leroy, and Leroy is bringing up all of these old things that they used to do, the dangerous stuff, the fun stuff, whatever the case may be, as they saw it at that time. And it made him feel alive. It woke him up. So he didn't tell Leroy that he had stopped everything. He just made it seem like, well, a couple of times he would say, "Nah, I'm just chilling right now." Did what I just said now. He said, "I'm just chilling right now." He never definitively slammed that door shut. So Leroy thought that door was still open. He had no idea. He had no reason to believe that it wasn't. So he continued on with his conversations, and over the course of a few weeks, maybe a month or so, whatever the case may be, Leroy said, "Look, man, why don't we shake the spot? You know what I'm saying? I still know some people. I know you got your plugs here at this institution, you know what I'm saying, so you can get it in for us and whatnot and all this and that. So why don't we go on and take care of the business and get some of this bread up here? I've been looking around and I see it's a lot of money up here. I know you already got your hands into it, but I ain't trying to get in your way and start messing up your money. I want to make my own lane. I just need a little help. I need a little push." Now, John is not telling him that he's not on that. So Leroy continues to have his conversation, and he said, "Look, I'm going to take care of some things, and then we'll pick this back up later." So now John goes off, and he's having this crisis in his mind, right? He's wrestling with himself. He's trying to be like, man, do I do this or not? Do I tell him that I'm not a part of this lifestyle, I don't get out like that anymore, or not? And he was torn. He didn't really know what he should say. If he did tell him that, he felt awkward because he wanted that feeling that he got from being involved in the business, but he didn't want it by doing the business. And that's a big, big distinction right there. We all want that sense of validation and self-worth, right? And it's almost like we'll do whatever we have to do to get it. And John was in this same situation trying to figure out, what do I do? And let me say this here. Like I said earlier, people experience this feeling of joy, elation, you know what I'm saying, in a relationship with somebody that they're in that may not be any good for them, but when they are around, they make them feel good. They ignore all of the warning signs. They ignore all the things that are going on with this individual that are bad for them because they lock in on the few things that makes them feel good. The question is, why do those things make you feel good? And that's what John was wrestling with. Why do I feel good about this? I stopped doing all of these things over here, and I've been doing fine for years, and then Leroy pops back up, and all of a sudden now he's saying, why does this make me feel good thinking and talking about these things that I know that will get me in trouble? So he started to analyze and he started to think, what's going on in my head? What's going on in my head? And it's just like a person that gets high or that drinks alcohol or whatever the case may be. When those endorphins get released in your head, however they get released, doesn't matter how they get released. They can get released through sex. They can get released through conversation. They can get released through drugs. They can get released through alcohol. They can get released through playing sports, extreme sports, whatever the case may be. Whatever triggers that and releases those endorphins, those adrenal glands inside your head that make you feel happy. That makes you feel happy. You're gonna want it. You're gonna want it. So now John is trying to figure out, what am I gonna do? I don't want to do this. I've changed my life. I have set this foundation for myself when I do get out of here, whenever that day is, to go on with my life in a law-abiding way. But I'm struggling right now. I'm struggling with this. What do I do? What do I tell Leroy? I don't want to lose him as a friend. Now, see, that's another thing that he was wrestling with. See, when you're doing these types of things, you think that because your self-worth is wrapped up to it, you also think that your friendship is wrapped up in it. And your friendship depends on it. And he's misreading everything. He's overcalculating everything. He's all inside of his head trying to figure out, what do I do? So then Leroy comes back. And he's talking to Leroy. And Leroy is telling him, look, man, I need somebody here that can bring the pack back. I got everything worked out. I get it all the way to the VG, but I need somebody to bring it back to the compound for me. Can you help me? And John reluctantly says, yeah, I can help you. I can help you. So now John has put himself back in the game. All of the years that the few years he had been walking the straight and narrow and trying to live down the past actions that he participated in, trying to live down that past reputation, trying to change the narrative for himself for the better. Now he's back in the game because he couldn't find it in himself to tell Leroy no. Because he felt as if his self-worth was wrapped up in it. His friendship was wrapped up in it. So now he has to do what? Fulfill what he just told Leroy. So now, keep in mind, he's been disconnected from the game. So now he's out. He's asking different people that he knew back in the day that were doing things for him, can you take care of this for my friend? Now they looking at him like, wait a minute. Okay, no problem, but I thought you were done. Well, it's not for me. It's for somebody else. You know what? They didn't believe him. They thought it was for him. They thought it was for him. Because, people do that. People go back and forth with how they feel. So when John was going back and forth with how he felt, the people that he was talking to, he didn't have Leroy talk to the guy. He talked to the guy. So the people that he was talking to, they felt like, okay, he just using that. He don't want nobody to know. I got you. Wink, wink, nod, nod. You understand what I'm saying? So here we go with this. He sets the arrangement. He makes sure everything's straight. And the question that I have is like, why didn't John, why do you think he didn't do this? But why didn't John introduce Leroy to the dude? Because he wanted that fix, that psychological fix. He wanted to be in it. He couldn't explain it to himself, but he liked it. He was thirsty for it. You understand what I'm saying? Just like somebody that can't let go of somebody that's bad for him. He wanted it, but he didn't. So he stuck his toe in the water. Now, when he stuck his toe in the water, it felt good. It wasn't too cold, wasn't too hot. It was just right. So now he's easing his foot back in it. And when he eased his foot back in it, he said, well, I'll just do this one time. I'll do this one time, and then I'm done with it. He gonna have to do it himself. I'll introduce them later. He could have done that off the top, but he didn't. So now he goes back to Leroy and he tells Leroy, look here, this is what it is, man. I got somebody that's going to take care of business for you. Whoop, this, and that. Now Leroy tells him, look, he said, I'm getting enough for both of us. I don't do nothing for free. You know what I'm saying? I know how it go. I'm going to give you such and such and give him such and such. And then I'm going to rock this thing and do me. You feel me? John didn't reject the offer. Hadn't done anything for years, but he didn't reject the offer. Now what is he going to do? Does he take it or not take it? That's the key right here. So John watches how everything is playing out. Leroy goes to visit. John doesn't go to visit this time. He tells the dude who to holler up in the VG. Leroy and the dude, they get together and they talk, and he said, this is when it's going to get here. This is what you do, blah, 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 this and that, so on and so forth. And the dude, the mule, said, I got it. This is not my first time. Everything's locked. So everything goes smoothly in the VG. Now it's coming back to the compound. And when they get back on the compound, Leroy tells John, meet me on the ball field. Then when he meets him on the ball field, Leroy already got the pack broke down and ready. He hands it over to John. This is you. Appreciate you. He done already paid the mule. John sits there and he looks at the pack. He got the pack in his hand. Now he don't know what to do. Leroy said, what's wrong, man? Everything's straight. It's some of that goody good. You know what I mean? And he looking at it. He said, it look good. You know what I'm saying? I ain't tripping about that, right? He said, man, but I don't know. He said, what you mean you don't know? He said, I don't know. Now, you got to keep in mind, Leroy's confused because Leroy don't know. John ain't told him nothing about him being out of the game. So he's looking at him like, man, what's going on? His antennas is going off. He's suspicious now. It's something up. Now he's looking around. He's wondering if John is trying to set him up. He wondering if John is trying to get him wrong. He don't know what's going on. But his friend is having a crisis within himself. He's battling within himself. What do I do? This ain't about Leroy. This is about John and his inability to be able to tell somebody no when it's in his best interest. Did you hear what I just said, y'all? Being able to tell somebody no when it's in your best interest. He was wondering why couldn't he do that? And this pack that he was looking at, this pack stood for all of the things that he didn't say to Leroy when he had a chance, because that is the result of him not saying no. Just like if you were in a bad relationship with somebody and you knew that you needed to get away from this person, whether it be a male or female, it doesn't matter. You know that you don't need to be around them. But when you don't tell them no, you don't separate yourself from them. You find yourself in a situation that you set in motion because you were not afraid. You didn't have the courage to tell them no. It's not them, it's you. Just like in this situation, it's not Leroy, it's John. Talk to me now. So now John is sitting there with this pack in his hand, and he hands it back to Leroy. He said, bro, I got something I need to tell you. And Leroy looks at him and he said, what's going on, man? He said, man, and I've been done with this, man. He said, but when you came back, you were giving me the business, you was talking to me about this, man, and I was feeling it. I was on that. You know what I'm saying? I was feeling good about it. But he said, man, I ain't on this no more. You can have this, man. He said, I helped you that one time. I ain't going to help you no more. Leroy looked at him like a lot of people do and said, man, why didn't you just tell me that? And the reason that John had a problem in telling him is the same reason a lot of people have a problem saying what they need to say. It's because they were all inside their heads. And John was all inside his head. He had all these different scenarios of how this thing can go bad if he says no. All of these different scenarios. And John had this reputation of being a real solid dude. And a real solid dude don't mean being a yes man or a yes woman. You understand? But when we look at the situation through a distorted lens, we're thinking about all the different things that's going to go wrong and how people are going to look at you. If you're a stand-up dude, you're a stand-up dude. That means you keep it thorough regardless. You keep it thorough regardless. And keeping it thorough don't mean doing something that you don't want to do. Keeping it thorough don't mean that you should do something criminal if you don't want to do it. And anybody that will make you feel that way, even if you're in a relationship, anybody that makes you feel that you're not keeping it thorough because you're not doing what they want you to do, even if it's not in your best interest, that is not a friend. It's not a friend. Now, even though Leroy was still doing what he was doing, Leroy was a true friend of John. And he told John, appreciate the pack, put that back in his pocket. And he said, man, all you had to do was tell me. Just as if you were in a relationship with somebody out there and you told them to look here, I'm not feeling this anymore. And this, that, and the third. And if they really got love for you, they'll understand. They might be a little hurt, but they'll understand. They'll understand. And they might try to change your mind, and ain't nothing wrong with that because it's on you to stand pat. It's on you to stand pat. But you stand pat, you stand firm, and you stand your ground, and then they'll eventually understand in most cases if they're not sick. Don't get it twisted. I know this is not Disneyland. This is not make-believe. This is not fairy tales. I do understand that some people don't accept no for an answer. But that shouldn't stop you from saying what's in your best interest. So when John and Leroy finished having the conversation, they were fine. See, a lot of people get it twisted to where they believe that they have to do something that they don't want to do to maintain a friendship, to make them feel good. Think about it. If your joy, if your self-esteem, if your confidence is wrapped up in anything external like that, a friend and conversations, which is internal, all of those types of things, you got a problem. And you need to think about that, evaluate that. Your self-worth should be wrapped up in you and your accomplishments, who you think you are, who you actually are, what you do in life, how you take care of your family, how you take care of yourself, your relationship with the Most High. It should not be dependent on you compromising who you are. You understand what I'm saying? And John had to learn that. He had to learn that. Fortunately for him, Leroy didn't care one way or the other if he was on that. He just wanted John to be honest with it. So just remember that, y'all. Remember that. If you find yourself in a situation that you're uncomfortable in, say no. Say no. Keep it thorough. Keep it 100. Don't participate in the genocide of our people. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.